You know, it's funny how a certain song can like totally take you back to a specific time, you know?
Right.
For me, even just like mentioning Operation Desert Storm, it's like Lee Greenwood's God Bless the USA starts playing in my head.
Yeah.
It's like the unofficial soundtrack to like that whole era, you know?
And it goes deeper than just being a catchy song, right? Like the fact that it had this like resurgence in popularity, it speaks to how much Operation Desert Storm really impacted our culture, which we'll definitely get into a bit later.
Yeah, for sure. Because today's deep dive, we're not just doing like the Desert Storm basics, like the who, what, where.
Yeah.
We're going deeper. We're looking at why it matters. Why are we still talking about this?
Exactly. And to really unpack that, we need to kind of like rewind back to 1990. Think about it. The Cold War, it just ended. The world was kind of like holding its breath, and this wasn't just about Kuwait, right?
Right.
It was about how the U.S., now kind of like the big dog on the block, how would they handle, something like this aggression on the world stage?
Yeah, so you have Saddam Hussein, he invades Kuwait and is like, nope, this is part of Iraq, always has been.
Yeah.
Big mistake.
Bold move, for sure. And regardless of any historical claims, right?
Oh.
It went against like every rule, violated international law, and basically threw a wrench into this new world order that was forming. Everyone was watching the U.S. like, okay, what are you going to do?
And we're talking a huge response, right? Operation Desert Storm, this coalition of countries coming together to be like, no way. I mean, my notes here, they mention Saudi Arabia, the UK, France, even Egypt, Syria, Sudan. It's like everyone was on board.
That's wild. Like, you don't see that kind of global effort, really. It was a huge message, This kind of thing, this aggression, not okay. But what's also crazy is how, like, we all experienced it, the public.
Oh, you're talking about, like, the beginning of news, like 24/7.
Exactly, yeah.
Because I was reading how, like, this person whose notes we're looking at, they actually, like, watched it all unfold in their living room, like, on TV.
Yeah.
Crazy.
Technology, right, satellites, all that. For the first time, you could see smart bombs hitting their targets live in your house.
Wow.
War just got real close.
It's true. And it makes you wonder, like, imagine if this had happened just 10 years earlier.
Totally a different world.
It wouldn't be the same.
This was huge, not just the war itself, but tech changing how we, like, experience these global events. War especially. It's like a turning point.
And speaking of tech, I'm curious about these smart bombs. What made them so different, so revolutionary?
Well, before this, bombs, not exactly known for their precision.
Right.
These new smart bombs, they were guided missiles, meaning much more accurate, hitting specific targets, way less collateral damage.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
I can see why someone would remember watching that, like, on TV.
Absolutely.
It's like something out of a movie, but real. And a total game changer, like you said.
Huge. And not just for, like, fighting the war itself. This tech plus CNN doing live coverage nonstop from the actual war zone. That's how we got 24/7 news.
It's true. We just, like, expect it now. Yep. It makes you wonder, though. All that info, those images going right into people's homes, how did that affect how everyone felt about the war? But, before we go there, I kind of want to rewind for a sec. Go back to this whole coalition thing.
Sure.
What's the big deal about all of these countries joining forces with the U.S.? Like, what's that say about what was going on in the world back then?
That's a really good question, and it gets to the heart of why Desert Storm was about way more than just Kuwait.
Right.
Like, the world was watching to see what would happen with this new world order post-Cold War. Would countries actually, like, team up to, enforce international law, this coalition forming? That was a powerful message.
It's like saying we're all in this together, not just about, like, military power. It's about unity.
Exactly. Being on the same page against aggression. But what's interesting, too, is how this message got, like, amplified, shaped even by the same tech we're talking about.
Right. That's where the culture part comes in. And that's where things get really interesting. Because we all know wars aren't just fought on, battlefields, right?
And God Bless the USA. The song you mentioned, that's a perfect example right there. Like how Operation Desert Storm, it worked its way into everything. That song was already popular, sure, but during Desert Storm, boom, instant anthem.
It's true. It's like I can't even hear that song without picturing like everyone putting those yellow ribbons like all over the place,
Exactly. It captured this whole wave of like patriotism, this feeling of we're all in this together. And it wasn't just the music. Operation Desert Storm, it even changed how war movies were made, how we see war on the big screen.
Whoa, really? I never thought about that. So you're saying, like, Desert Storm changed the whole, like, way movies about war were made.
Totally. Before Desert Storm, war movies, they were kind of, same old, same old. Lots of cliches, not always realistic. But then Desert Storm happens. All of a sudden, war, it's in your face, it's real, it's raw. Filmmakers, they had to find a new way to show that.
So they had to, like, step up their game, make it more real.
Exactly. Capture that intensity, the grit, the emotional toll, all of it.
Did it work?
Oh, yeah. Look at Saving Private Ryan, for example, or that series Band of Brothers. Both came out years later, but they have that Desert Storm influence. More realistic, you really feel it. Desert Storm changed the game, no question.
Wow. Okay, so we've got the songs, the movies. What else? Oh, I've got something in my notes here about a left hook. Sounds more like boxing than, military stuff.
Ah, yes. The left hook. That's what people call this. Like, really smart maneuver, really effective. General Norman Schwarzkopf, he was the brains behind it.
Okay, now I'm really curious. Tell me more.
So picture this. Saddam Hussein, he's thinking, okay, they're going to come straight for Kuwait. That's the obvious move. But instead, nope. The coalition forces, they take a little detour.
A detour? Where'd they go?
Through Saudi Arabia, actually. They swung all the way around, ended up flanking the Iraqi army. Totally unexpected.
They went around. No way! That's crazy!
Bold move, right? And it totally worked. The Iraqi forces, they were caught completely off guard. This left hook, it was a huge reason why the war was over so quickly. Shows you how important it is to think outside the box, especially in a war.
And all of this is happening, like, live on CNN, right? Talk about a front row seat to history.
Can you imagine? It wasn't just, here's what's happening. It was live, as it happened, with experts explaining everything.
Today, it's weird to think of a time when we weren't constantly getting, like, bombarded with information.
Right. And that's the thing about Desert Storm. It wasn't just about how wars were fought. It was about how we experienced them.
Yeah.
A huge moment for the media. How they shape what everyone thinks, especially during something like a war.
It makes you think, what if this had happened, like, 10 years earlier, even? Before all this technology. Would people have cared as much? Would the outcome have been different, even?
It's a good question, isn't it? It all ties together. Tech, the media, and, global conflicts.
Okay, so we've got the tech, the cultural impact, the military strategy. Anything else?
We should talk about the coalition itself for a second.
Yeah.
Remember, this wasn't just the U.S. doing its own thing. This was a whole bunch of countries, all with their own reasons for being there.
Right. Like we talked about earlier, the whole United Front thing.
Exactly. And that coming together, it had a lasting effect. It set the stage for how countries would work together in the future, when something like this happens again.
So Operation Desert Storm, it wasn't just about, like, fixing one problem in Kuwait. It was about setting up a new world order, almost.
Exactly. The whole world was watching. The stakes were high. This war and how everyone responded, it sent a message. Hey, international cooperation, following the rules, that's how we're doing things now, especially with the Cold War over.
And you know what? That's still relevant even today. It's kind of wild, right? Something that happened, like 30 years ago, and it's still something we're talking about today.
It really shows you how much of an impact Operation Desert Storm had. It wasn't just like a blip on the radar. It was this whole thing that set off all these other changes, from like global politics to how we even get our news.
We've covered a lot, that's for sure. This whole left hook thing, how 24/7 news became the norm, even the music and, like, the feeling in the country back then.
And honestly, we're just scratching the surface. There's so many other angles to this. Stories, different points of view, all kinds of stuff we could dive into.
That's what I love about these deep dives. We start with one thing, but it always leads to something else. All these connections and, like, aha moments.
Totally. It reminds you that history isn't just like dates and names in a textbook. It's about understanding where we are now and where we might be going.
So on that note, I think it's time to leave our listeners with something to, like, chew on. One last thought from our Desert Storm deep dive.
Okay, how about this? What if Operation Desert Storm happened before the Berlin Wall fell? Before the Soviet Union, wasn't a thing anymore?
Whoa. Okay, so rewind even further back when the Cold War was still, like, the big thing, right?
Yeah. Think about how different things would have been. Would the U.S. have had all those other countries backing them up? Would it have been this whole big global event? with the media right there broadcasting everything.
Makes you realize, like, how much everything's connected, right? One thing happens, and it just ripples out.
Exactly. It's like a chain reaction.
Yeah.
And if we really want to understand what's happening in the world, we got to look at how things led up to where we are now, you know?
Couldn't agree more. So there you have it. We started with Operation Desert Storm, but look where we ended up, talking about global power, technology, how it all affects our culture, everything.
It's a trip, right?
Totally. And on that note, we'll let you keep thinking about those what-ifs and keep exploring Operation Desert Storm. Until next time, keep those notes coming, because we're ready to dive into whatever you throw our way.